We are really fortunate at Woven Rose Needlecraft to now be stocking caterpillar cross stitch, and to celebrate this I thought it would be a great opportunity to show you how easy and fun it is to stitch not only a caterpillar cross stitch kit but indeed any cross stitch kit. So here I am unboxing the kit, and you can see that we have some nice clear instructions and also our full colour chart. This I just have covered over due to copyright. And then we have our threads all arranged on our lovely thread card. And then you can see we also have some fabric. In this case it was 14 count Ada. Your kit may be different. And then we also had a needle. So all I had to add was a hoop, which you'll see in a moment, and also some embroidery scissors for trimming our threads. I always recommend that you start any cross stitch project by securing the edges of your fabric to prevent fraying. As you can see, I have done this with a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine, but of course you can use whatever method works best for you, and lots of ideas are available online. So maybe go and have a look and see what works best for you. Because I want to start at the center of my piece, I need to find the center of my fabric, and I do this by folding it over once and then folding it over again, and where those two creases cross, that point is my center point. And I now want to mark that by placing the very first stitch. The center stitch of the chart is marked by a dot, and so I find the corresponding thread, in this case the deep brown, and I cut a length just a little bit longer than my arm. I was using stranded cotton in this piece. You will probably be using stranded cotton too. So what I want to do is to hold the thread firmly in my left hand, and then to grab just one of the little strands with my right hand and pull it until it comes completely loose, because we're only using one of these very fine strands to stitch with. Now my chart actually asks me to stitch with 2 strands, but I've just said I'm only going to use 1 strand to stitch with. So how does that make sense? Well, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to double over that strand so that it's technically 2 strands, and it will leave a little loop at the end. And I want that loop because we're going to use what's called the loop start method. And so that's why I cut quite a long thread at the beginning, pulled out a single strand, and then doubled over the strand. I hope that will make sense. So now I'm using that loop just to thread through the eye of my needle, and then I'm pulling my thread so that the loop end is longer than the 2 raw edges end, if that makes any kind of sense. I hope that makes sense. So now I am just double checking I have my fabric oriented in the correct direction. In this case it is portrait, and then I'm going to place my first stitch at that center point by using the loop start method. If you've never stitched at all before, I do have a video on how to make your very first stitches, but basically I like to go in at the bottom left hand corner, out of the top right hand corner, pass the needle through the loop, pass the needle back through that top right hand hole, pull that little knot around to the back, and then I come back out at the bottom right hand corner and then in again at the top left hand corner, and that's made my very first little cross. And again at this point it's only 1 cross I want to make, just to mark that center point, because when I put the fabric into the frame, the tension on the fabric will pull it so that those crease lines are no longer visible, and it would be really difficult to find the center point in that way. So this is why I make that stitch first of all. Now I am just placing my piece of fabric into my hoop. In this case I found that a number 2 Nurge hoop was the ideal size, and then just a little bit of playing around just to make sure that the tension is where I want it to be. So you want the tension on your fabric to be drum tight is what they always say, and especially when your fabric is brand new and a little bit stiff, this can just take a little bit of playing around just to get it where you want to be, and so that you have a really solid foundation for beginning your stitching. Now on to the actual stitching, and I just continue on working from the center. And as you can see here, I'm just working these rows of brown back and forth in what is called the Dutch or the Danish method. So working the bottom leg of the stitch across and then working the top legs of the stitch on my way back. Once that big block of brown stitches, which makes up the top wall, was complete, I moved on to filling in the lettering. And if you're wondering what the little teacup is, it is a magnetic needle minder. So if you're a new stitcher, these are little ornaments that we buy and attach to our cross stitch with magnets. And because they're magnetic, we can lay down our needle and be sure that the needle won't get lost. So if you're interested in getting into cross stitch kind of more seriously, they are a really nice little investment, a little needle minder. So once the lettering was done, I moved on to the window ledges and the bricks. As you can see here, stitching in low light, not always easy. I find that a lamp directly overhead can help, or I even have like neck lights, reading lights, little LED lights, anything at all. You really can't be straining your eyes with this. It's not worth it. And there are so many lovely little lighting options out there. So although it looks very dark, it actually was bright. It just doesn't really show very well on the camera. And then onto the windows, which were these really cute, like leaded windows, very quintessential of the English pub that we're stitching. And then, of course, the little floral window boxes, which were so cute. And then onto the roof tiles and the chimneys. And then the top half of our pub was pretty much complete. And it was time to move the fabric in the hoop and start on the bottom half of the pub. Just like with the top half of the pub, for the bottom half, I started with the wall, just to kind of get everything in the right place and give myself kind of a framework. And then I moved on to the door and onto the other bottom windows, and they even have little shutters, which are so cute. If you're not from the UK, but you ever get a chance to go, I would really recommend that you try and find a little country pub to visit, because they're just so quaint and so beautiful. And some of the architecture over there is absolutely gorgeous. I'm not saying that we don't have lovely pubs here. We do. We absolutely do. But there's something about that quintessential, quaint English pub that is just such a glorious image. I think sometimes people who are not from the UK or Ireland don't really understand the role that a pub, particularly a country pub, plays. It's not so much about the drinking, it's more so about a place for community and for people to catch up with each other. It's especially important, I think, in very rural areas where you might have a lot of farmers, as we do where I live, that may not really have anyone to talk to. Like, they may just be spending their days on their own with their livestock or their crops or their tractors. And really, if they are working on their own on these small farms, the only people they might get to see is, someone that comes with the delivery. And so for them, it's really important to be able to go down to the pub in the evening, spend an hour having a chat with everyone. Everyone kind of checks in on each other, shares the news, has a chat. And I think in these days when there's so much focus on mental health and on loneliness, it's really important to remember the people in the countryside, especially men who may not have another outlet. And that's why pubs are so important. And if you don't drink, you can 100% go to pubs. I've gone to pubs and had cups of tea or glasses of sparkling water, or there's non-alcoholic drinks or whatever. It's really not about the drinking. It is about the socialization, I suppose, if that's a word. Socializing, I don't know. And about community and about everyone kind of checking in on each other. And, if someone doesn't turn up a few nights in a row, they might start to say, well, hold on, should we check in on so-and-so and make sure they're okay? So that's my little rant about the importance of pubs in the community. And now we'll move on back to the stitching. I think I've had enough time on my soapbox for today. So back to the stitching. So you just saw me stitching the lovely parasol, the table and chairs, and then it was on to this gorgeous bench. I am guessing that this particular pub is enjoying a bit of sunshine, because I can tell you there are not many parasols or bright benches outside the pubs in my local area at the moment in the middle of March, but there we go. So then the bench was complete. It was onto the gorgeous flowers in the hanging baskets in the window boxes. Believe it or not, there's actually only 8 shades of thread in this piece. It's just the way the colours are worked together which makes it so effective. But yeah, just 8 shades. So really ideal for a beginner who doesn't want too many threads to have to keep track of. I think these kits in particular are very beginner friendly. I think most cross stitch kits, with a few exceptions, are great for beginners. And like I always say, they make kits, that is, make really great presents for people. If you know someone who you think might want to take up cross stitch, then a kit is a fantastic way to introduce them, because they don't really need to buy anything except for a hoop or maybe a scissors, although they probably have some kind of scissors in their house, which will already do. But anyway, then we went on to the gorgeous little hanging sign. This was actually my favourite part of the whole piece. And then we were done. That's what it looked like at the end. Our caterpillar cross stitch is complete. And now I need to go and decide what piece I'm going to stitch next. Bye!